Welcome into Hoops Forum, a production of Radius Athletics and a quick timeout podcast. I'm Tony Miller, and joining me once again this week is my co-host Randy Sherman. Big thanks to our sponsors over at 323 Sports. Your players, parents, and fans will love the 323 Sports $55 team packs. Each pack includes a short sleeve tee, long sleeve tee, performance short, and heavyweight hoodie, all with your school's branding included. To find out more, visit 323sports.com, or you can contact a sales rep at sales@323sports.com. They'll be sure to do it right for your basketball program. Well, March is here, and
Mhm.
when it comes to the conference tournaments and the national tournaments and everything else, we love March Madness here in the U.S. Randy, while
Yes.
watching some games, even this week, there
Yeah.
were some things that I thought that maybe we could talk about, and some
Okay.
things I wanted to get your opinion on. I'll start broad here. Trends that you're noticing, maybe anything specific to styles of play or something within those styles of play.
In the college game, I would say some. I think what has happened, as long as I've been an observer of basketball, and that's been since the late '80s, early '90s. I started coaching in '95, and so a long time. Is things sort of trickle down from the professional NBA level down to the college, down to the pro, or to the amateur high school, whatever you want to call that level, depending on where you are listening. But yeah, so I guess like I see some trends, um, more five out, more depth of the offensive spacing, meaning uh, you know what started in the analytics revolution in the NBA is now pretty much saturated, at least the high level college basketball that we watch on television. Is the depth of spacing, meaning like guys are all the way down to the corners in the at rim depth, and not playing like kind of up above the baseline. There's always sort of that width and depth of spacing. It's getting a little bit better overall. And I see a lot of I guess you could say five out actions that from at least at the beginning of the possession, there may not be a post player occupying the ball side block, or something like that. It's more, there's more of a big guy trailing, or something like that, or drag ball screen, side ball screen, what I would call a side drag or something like that. So the initial setup of the offense isn't as much, you know, two guys down on the blocks, three guards. So that's a definite trend. I'd say, um, you know, the prevalence of generating offense off dribble penetration is pretty well saturated throughout the college game, as far as whether that be straight driving it or using a ball screen to generate that penetration. But I think that's something I see a few. It could be a bias of mine, just because I tend to look for it. Some sort of Princeton esque and Princeton inspired teams out there. They may not be full on Princeton, but you see some of those nods to that offense and some of the things they do, playing off splits and dribble ats and stuff like that. I see that. I would say, yeah, those are some of the things, trends I see.
Yeah, as somebody I've done a lot. Those that have followed with like fast model and drawing plays, and Randy's
Hmm.
done a lot of that as well. And
Sure.
I haven't done a deep dive study on this, and I don't have numbers with it, but it does feel like there's fewer set plays
Yeah,
that are run.
I would
Your
agree.
set plays are reserved primarily for your special situations and ATOs, but even ATOs a lot of times are just combinations of concepts and actions, not necessarily like a set play. There's also, it seems to be fewer continuity offenses where you're seeing the same thing happening over and over. And I
Yeah.
do think that that sometimes can maybe be mistaken as being sloppy basketball, because there's not this, I can't identify them doing the same thing. And it does sometimes look a little bit sloppy. I saw somebody comment last night about, a lot of it. I didn't know I don't know what game they were watching, but there was 4 guys standing around watching one guy dribble the ball. That very well may have been the case. Bad basketball is still bad basketball, and I wouldn't say that that's good. But I do think that when you play conceptually, sometimes wherever that ball goes determines what happens next, and
Yeah.
players are sometimes slower to think about, okay, what am I seeing? What do I need to do next? But to your point, I do think that we're training players to look for space, and sometimes that requires them to slow down, which can almost slow down your offenses sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
so unless you're running like the Princeton actions, like we talked about, where there's 4 or 5 guys moving that triggers what the next thing is happening,
Hmm.
sometimes that can look maybe not as pretty as people would like it to be. But just interesting the way that the game has gone, and we'll come back and talk about like some of those teams to watch for and some
Okay.
things and specific actions and that sort of stuff. Um, Maybe in that same vein of the guy who didn't like what he saw, are there any trends that you aren't fond of or don't like that you're seeing in today's game?
Yeah, I would say there's just this sort of general stalemate that I don't like, that I do see quite a bit. The past 2 weeks, I've watched, with the coaches I work with that are high school coaches, a lot of their playoff games, and third, fourth round of the playoffs, regional tournament, state tournament type games. Then watching conference play and conference tournaments in on television, and then on into March Madness as we go. I guess the stalemate I would describe it as is we've got a defense who's doing everything it can to not let the ball get driven into the paint versus an offense who's only trying to drive it into the paint anyways. So it just creates this sort of like bloody knuckle, uh, collision heavy, just flopping, flailing, bumping rock fight of a game sometimes that just is a little bit unesthetic. And I don't know if that's a word, but we'll say that's a word. That's not aesthetic, or aesthetically pleasing. Yeah, it's like the defense is doing everything it can not to get penetrated, and the offense is just their whole offense is we're going to penetrate anyway. And and there's no, um, I don't know. It feels like gridlock.
Mm-hmm. A game I was watching last night felt just like that, and the game went over 2 hours, and it was no overtime or anything.
Hmm.
But looking back on it, the number of fouls, the kinds of fouls that were being called, it seems like everybody still hates the charge call that's made in college basketball. But you see a lot of that because of the offense's determination to drive no matter what, and the defense's determination to not let them do that. And when they don't get the charge call, then it becomes another foul. Or I do feel like sometimes you have officials who just, we're not going to call everything that happens. And
Yeah,
so fouls are, overlooked, and then that's when it becomes kind of that sloppiness. So yeah, interesting to see how maybe things will change in connection with that, or not change if teams are just, this is what we're going to do, and
yeah.
that's just how it's going to be. Maybe it's just the magnitude of the games that I'm watching here,
Hmm.
but the runs in these games seems to
Yeah,
be more noticeable. And I think probably it has some to do with you got 2 teams that are your best teams in the conference, or some of your best teams that are left. And so the gap between the two is very narrow, but
hmm,
still, basketball being a game of runs, I saw one team up by 19 in the first half, and the other team came within a bucket before halftime. So there was a huge
yeah,
swing both sides of the ball. Aside, when it comes to you coaching in a situation like that, and knowing that within these games in March you are going to have runs, may not be 19 points, but
sure.
7-0, 9-0, 11-0, whatever. Aside from just calling a timeout, is there anything that you've seen teams do to kind of change the flow, or to stop one of those runs, or maybe get one of those runs going for their team?
Well, with the timeout being the most obvious, I'll talk on that just briefly, but I'll give you some ideas beyond that. Um, One of my sort of like, I guess you could say, automatics as a coach was if our opponent scores 3 straight field goals, I'm calling timeout. If they score 3 straight field goals, I'm calling timeout. That's maybe something actionable some of our listeners could take. We kept a possession chart. Um, so I would have my JV coach or assistant coach or what. Hey, that's 3 straight field goals and timeout. Like just to. So I know you want some ideas beyond that, but that's one. Um, I see coaches, kind of change the defense to um, from say zone to man or vice versa to sort of like the rationale being that this team has sort of caught a rhythm against this defense and they found something that works and they're really they're really just seeing it really well and maybe let's change defenses. um, I think if you want to conserve timeouts, another thing you can do is make substitutions. Like that's almost like a little tacit timeout. Like we got to blow the horn, let this guy sub in, take your time walking on and off the court. To almost, if you're trying to conserve your timeouts, we can kind of like maybe use one without using one by doing that. Um, I would say I think if a team's making a run on you, it's okay to have have something you want to do offensively to get a basket that like breaks that run, whether that be a set play or just sort of like a command that says we got to get a shot in the paint or we got to get um, a specific player a shot or something like that, just to sort of answer the run. So that's an idea. I think too the the main thing I would look at is like how is the run being generated? Is it just transition, like they're just rebound outlet scoring on us? Well, then maybe let's um, look at our shot selection that might be leading to easy baskets and get a specific player shot or get a specific type of shot that we think might clean that up. But like you said, runs are a part of the game. I think the biggest challenge for a team in March is sort of like withstanding them and kind of like when it's going, just maybe trying some of the things that I talked about, but also knowing that this was going to happen. Like we're going to have one of our own at some point in the game as well, and that's what I see a lot of these games. They're withstood and then answered at a latter part of the game by the team, so it's a little more back and forth. So those are some ideas.
The two that have paired together well for us was the calling the set play, especially. If you can have a set of 5 plays or whatever, and this is who we're trying to get the ball to, being very specific, I guess, about who you're
Yeah,
getting the ball to, and then what type of shot that you're getting. Because I found that most coaches, they're not just they're not happy with the type of shots that they're getting. Um,
yeah,
and so if you can create the type of shot that you want in the hands of the person that you want to have that shot, that can dramatically improve your chances there. And then pairing that with, hopefully after that score, is to set up some kind of full court pressure. And our pressure that was helpful was not something that was designed to generate turnovers, but instead something that was designed to control the pace of it.
yeah.
And
Good
all of
idea.
those things that you mentioned were, I'm basically not allowing, because typically a flow or a run is there's some level of comfortability that team has had in doing what they are doing.
Yeah,
And if I can make them change the way that they have to think or approach something, that usually cuts that flow of whatever they're feeling comfortable with. So if I can then control the pace and then set something up, and like you said I saw last night, one of the examples you gave was there was a team that they went to zone and there was nothing special about the zone, but
yeah.
you could tell just from watching the game that it made the other team change the way that they were approaching and thinking about things.
It just changed their I don't know, their whole attack and aggressiveness. Maybe we watched the same game, but
I think I think there's something in regards to focus and perception that probably is a lot deeper than what we prepared for today. But
yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
I wonder if this happens a lot. That I know I hear this a lot from coaches is like maybe they're playing a team that's better than them. Maybe it's early round playoff and they're a 15 seed and they're playing a 2 seed, right? Or something like that. And I'll hear them after the game say, "Oh, we were right there with them until the second quarter. Then they went on a 15-2 run or a 19-0 run." And I was like, "Yeah, well, they're a lot better team than you. They only had to play good for 5 minutes. Like you had to play good for 40. They had to play good for 5, and they did that, and then just sort of played with their food the rest of the game. So you weren't right there with them, like." That sometimes is what a run is also, just a team that's a lot better than you that really knows it only needs to like run hard for this part of the race and you won't you that's fine. That'll do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, strategies for dealing with a dominant post player and the
Hmm.
pros and cons for those strategies.
I think um man, I've encountered this for sure, and definitely felt like I had no good strategy. Like what am I supposed to do? Like I'm sort of taking a knife to a gunfight here when they've got a 6'4" girl and my post girl's 5'9" or 5'10". Like what are we, okay, I could, what do you want me to front her, play behind her? I've done both of those things. And like there's really sometimes there's just not a great X's and O's solution. And when I felt like those was the case, I just tried to change the tone and tenor of the game, meaning let's make it the type of game that a post player is not really involved in. Like get it going up and down to where that post player is just basically running top of key to top of key, and a shot goes up before they even kind of get a chance to go down there and establish some real estate. And I always say a team where their best player is their post doesn't scare me that much sometimes, but where their best player is a post, meaning they have weak guards and a post, it's almost like they've got a great wide receiver without a good quarterback to get him the ball. Like, I mean, if you've got a great post player, but your guards are shaky and we can pressure you, deny you, influence you towards, sideline pin you, really rattle you at the point of attack when you've got the ball, then we sort of render that good post player. All right, well, it's fine. She's great or he's great, but they can't get him the ball. You see, aside from those ideas, you see teams sort of like, go zone against a good, like we don't have anyone who can just guard them on the block, fronting or playing behind. So we're going to go zone and just, I'd say the pro would be maybe you can collapse the real estate around the post doing that. But the con is obviously you surrender space on the perimeter. You might get 3-balled to death or something like that if it's a complete team.
Mhm.
Doubling is another option. I don't think that's a bad option. I've definitely done that before. Is doubling the post. We tended to do it from what we would call the top eye, meaning if there's a ball side post and say it's 4 out, so they've got 2 players behind on the other side of the court from the ball side post. We would have our help side eye, low eye, and top eye. One sort of is underneath the hoop. One is like on up the line, up the midline from them. Um, and if the ball went into the post, the top eye doubled down the baseline. The girl, or in my case, the girl or the guy guarding the post, their job is don't let them turn baseline. So kind of like play that low foot so they can't turn to the base, like spin to the baseline. And then the double comes from the high side. So when they feel they can't turn baseline and they want to turn middle, they turn right into a double team. We approach that double team with high hands to try to maybe get a deflection of the pass out of the post. The con there is obvious. We've got 2 players guarding 1, so that means 3 are guarding 4 everywhere else. So if that post can make a pass out of the post, and then we're in a scramble situation and are going to have to really fight to reorganize. So those are some strategies. I've used all or most of them, and to with good and bad results. So.
Mhm. I have nothing different, but I do have a couple stories just from this year. Small sample size, but we almost had more success completely fronting
Hmm.
and deterring them from throwing it. And then when they did throw it, sending help from behind. That allowed me not to have to work on what you just said. When I double, now I'm having to work on rotations. And it was almost like which one's going to burn me less.
Yeah.
And so I just encourage coaches to kind of think of it from that perspective. If I'll say this from the offensive perspective, if I'm somebody who has that dominant post player, if you're only just posting them up on the block, I do feel, especially in today's game, you're probably you're easier to plan for and to scout for. And
Yeah.
I've just noticed that the teams that have like the Purdue's and I was watching earlier this week a team from a mid major that had a big player. They had success bringing that player out to the perimeter and using them as a screener. Really hard to get around, but then in addition to that,
Hmm.
dive them hard to the basket. And now you are forcing that team that's playing defense to probably tag or roll, and then you can have more open shots. So you're almost forcing them to kind of send two people to the to the big man, or to at least account for the big man. And that's where I've seen teams offensively have success versus in the past when they do just sit a big player on the block and say, we're going to throw it in there and then go to work.
Yeah, in that case, that player's like a stationary target that we know where they're going to be, and we can start running strategies at them. Another thing I didn't mention, I've seen also, is choking the post, meaning, um, let's say I'm guarding the ball on the wing, the wing feeds the post, and I sort of you know, dig down in there. I know Virginia calls it choking the post. They'll dig down in there with the feeders man, and try to, they'll teach the guy to dig down with his hand up to try to like flip the ball up. If the guy brings it down off his chin, brings it low, we can flip the ball up. And they're just sort of like, the motive would be to sort of like choke the post, get the ball back out from that threatening, penetrating pass that they made to the block. I didn't mention that when you asked me some strategies, and it just dawned on me while you were speaking to go back and hit that. So, con to that would be a good team that enters and relocates. That you're choking the post, and the guy, maybe you turn your head to look, and you think when it comes back out, your man was right. That's what we used to say when we feed the posts: is don't be right where they left you, meaning relocate, like higher, lower. Another con with that is you're vulnerable to split action. Like you're choking the post while your man's going to set a screen. Um, you're choking the post, and then the guy comes off the screen with no one to show onto the guy coming off the screen, because you're down there choking the post. So those are some cons to that strategy.
That's good. That's good. All right. So as we enter here, into the NCAA tournament, kind of finishing out the conference tournaments,
Hmm.
coaches and or teams that you're looking forward to watching this March.
That's a great question, man. There's a lot of them. I've been really kind of trying to zero in on a few, because you really just can't watch them all, like at least not live, and you've got to go back and look at highlights, or you know video services or whatever to catch them all. But before I answer that, I would say, speaking of conference tournaments, I was talking with the coaches I work with last night. What are your thoughts on what if I was made NCAA basketball commissioner today? I don't even know if that's a real job, but one of the things I would change would be the regular season champ gets the automatic bid. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the big how many teams we should have in the tournament because of that thought. And a team getting hot in March may not necessarily be reflective of how good the team is over the course of the season.
Or
I think just because of the amount of games that you're playing, that should determine who's rewarded for playing in the championship rather than a team that could end up taking a bid from somebody else because they won a couple games
or
or
they
just
the conference champ, regular season champ,
exactly
who went 15-2 in the conference, gets in the conference title game and just has a bad game, and now they're in the NIT, and we're sending a team that's 500 to the tournament to go get blasted by Duke in the first round or something.
right.
I
Right.
think the overall tournament would be better. Now, would it take something away from the excitement of conference championship week? And yeah, but it feels more just to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, for
but
sure. I
anyway,
agree.
teams that I'm interested in watching. I'll start with sort of some of the, I guess, like the more power conferences or highly ranked teams that have been sort of talked about all season. I really love watching the Houston Cougars. Um, they're physical, they're tough, they play well on the road. I don't think they've. I mean, I think they've got a great road record, a like true road game record. Um, they just do a lot of things that and it's a reflection of their head coach, just a tough as nails, um, competitive group of guys, and that's a reflection on their head coach. And I really love watching them play. Um, I like watching Alabama play. I think they're sort of the shining example of kind of like the modernity of basketball that has trickled down from the NBA. They might be the poster child for that at the college level as far as the application of analytics and spacing and shot selection and things like that. It's always interesting how that team or a team that's really big on that, how that plays out in the different arena of a single elimination 6 game progression to a tournament. Is that when you're that heavily reliant on the 3-point shooting, and rim and three, and you're shooting 40, maybe even 50% of your shots are 3-pointers. There's such a variance from game to game in that. Like there's a thing of shooting variance is like we shoot 38% for three as a team doesn't mean we shoot 38% from three every night. It means some nights we shoot 45 and some nights we shoot 25. And that it so when you've got that 6 game, on one of those 6 games is probably going to be one of those nights that it's not going. So it's always interesting to me to see, like, I mean, I may eat these words, but I probably won't pick them to win the tournament, but I could see them winning it, but I won't pick them because I think of one of those 6 games, it's just not going to happen for them. And that's that, but I'm intrigued by that sort of type of team at the at the at the at the college level when it's not necessarily the same sport as the professional level. Another team I've watched a little bit of recently because I've just been looking at some of the Ken Palm numbers and things like that is St. Mary's out in California. Really good defensive team, a good offensive team, but a really good defensive team. Always competitive, very good tradition out there, and I think this year they're actually won the conference over Gonzaga. If I think they're the #1 seed in that tournament, so that's a bit of a development. So this might be the best team they've had, if that's the case. If they, so maybe I'll go off the radar a little bit. A couple other teams that I don't want to steal your thunder, but I like watching Furman. I like watching. I like watching them and some of the concepts they do. So I'll stop there and let you answer one. Sorry.
Those are good. A couple of those came to my mind, Alabama in particular, Furman as well. If your coach is interested in conceptual offense and 5 out and kind of a hybrid of those things, those coaches have made them their own. So you're not going to see like pure, you will see like very common
Yeah.
actions and you're like, oh yeah, that is that. And it will be that. But
Yes.
then you'll see some other things as well that they've
Another
added in.
thing about Furman that I've noticed after watching some film the past few days, probably since the better Villanova teams, probably the best team I've seen of stride stopping, jump stopping, barkleying, and nashing. Like they do all of that stuff very well. Like they all play off 2 feet. They get to good stops. So that I always look for that something like that. Like when I watch a team play, like I should be able to see from watching a game something that you as a coach emphasize just jump off the screen at me. I watch the Houston Cougars. It's offensive rebounding. They just go get it, man. Like that's a little thing that jumps off the screen when I watch them play. Like all their players do it. Now, if one of your players does it, that just may be his good habit, but this is something that you would know. So I'll shut up, but like I've definitely noticed that.
Yeah, if you want to hear more about that and how they teach that, then go back and listen to a Quick Timeout podcast with Coach Jeremy Grow. We had an
Okay.
entire episode on their footwork and how they teach that, and they do a fantastic
So
job
I'm
with
not
that.
wrong.
No, you're not wrong at all.
Okay,
That's
I did
something
pick up on that.
that's something very intentional that they do, and they spend a lot of time doing it, and it's a part of their offense. It's not like you can do this if you want to. It's how they teach their offense and how it generates particular shots for them in the
Yeah, they
kinds of
second
stops that
cut
they
when they
do.
stop. They make second cuts. You see it all the time in there.
Yeah, they do a great job with that.
Yeah,
There's
sorry to interrupt, but
That's all right. There's one more that I would encourage. Fairleigh Dickinson is
okay,
one with Coach Tobin Anderson. This is his first year, and it doesn't matter what happens in their championship game. They're going because the other team isn't a qualifier yet for the NCAA tournament.
okay,
So they're actually headed to the NCAA tournament already, and he is in his first year. Was a D2 coach last year, and he does a fantastic job. They do a lot of 5-out. And they use a lot of staggers, and they do a lot of unique things with their stagger screens. And that's another plug for
okay,
going back and searching a Quick Timeout podcast and listening to Tobin Anderson's episode. It was released, I think, early winter this last year. But they're a team that if you're wanting to watch that kind of offense, he would be great as well. And then just the kind of the standards, set plays. Coaches love those.
mm-hmm.
Purdue, Creighton is another one. If you
Yeah,
haven't watched, nobody's going to like this, but if you haven't watched Duke this year, like John Shire and what he's doing, a lot of set plays, horns, and kind of he does the series of things. So they'll come down the floor and they'll start with an opening horns play, and then they'll come back down the floor and run the exact same thing, but then do kind of like step number 2, and they'll come down
mm-hmm.
the floor and do the exact same thing again and step number 3. And so they have kind of like a family of plays that they run at different times in the game. So those would just be some coaches I think that off the top of my head probably
I'm gonna offer
suggest.
one more that came to me. That a team I always like. Sometimes when they'll be on and it's late at night and I can't fall asleep. San Diego State.
Hmm.
They're a really good defensive team. So probably top 10 or 15 in the country in defense, and um, that's something that they kind of perennially are in the metrics rankings as top 10, 15 in defense. So again, with the this is something we do here. It's not negotiable. And they're a good defensive team to watch if you're into watching not just offense, but really good defense too.
Yeah, a lot of great teams, ones that you may not be as familiar with, especially here at the conference tournaments, but then also the NCAA tournament coming up. So a lot of exciting things here on the horizon. That'll do it for this week. Appreciate all of you who listened, watched. If you missed any part of the live show, you can go back and search Hoops Forum on YouTube. There you'll find the video version of the show. And then if you're looking for the audio version, just go to any podcast platform and search A Quick Timeout, and you'll find that there. For Randy Sherman, I'm Tony Miller. We'll talk to you again next time on Hoops Forum.